Thank you. All right. First off, thanks for coming. I already lost a bet. The over-under was 6 people, so I lost. But thank you for being here. I thought I should first introduce myself a little bit. My name's Steve Davis, obviously. But I was part of the 451 acquisition. And at 451, I was the CTO. Myself and 2 of my colleagues were the people who created the notion of OrderCloud from the original data model of our SaaS application that was started in 2001. Okay? It's important to know that we have more than 20 years building a commerce data model that supports a myriad of solutions. But the idea of OrderCloud was a bit foresightful. We saw some emerging trends, and we said, hey, this might be a really good way for us to challenge some competition and be ahead of the curve. And so we started with that. And we've watched the tides turn to the point where you start to see a lot of other marketing terms applied to things. And obviously today's is composable. So the question I always get is, well, what does that even mean? And so that's what I wanted to bring to this conference, to talk about what my idea of composable is and how we've built OrderCloud to support that. Okay? So forgive my picture. It's a little old. That was from back when I had a lot more hair. So I'll get a new one sometime soon. All right. First and foremost, what's that fancy way to describe composable? This is from Gartner. It's composable architecture means constructing an ecosystem of modular services loosely coupled together that produces solutions at enterprise scale. Okay? In all of that sentence, the only thing that really truly matters to me is loosely coupled. That's the key. That's the key to the entire notion of composability. How do you couple systems together without tightly integrating them so that there's a bespoke integration that you have to support and maintain? And then with it being loosely coupled, you're able to bring other services, plug different one ins and out, and bring that together. So, it's a fancy way of saying integrating services, right? The good news is that we've been at this for a long time. So composable as a strategy might be kind of new, but it's not new to the people who've been building these systems for a long while. Oh my God, Sitecore just told me I have to reboot my computer because of an update. So let me snooze that real quick. All right. So with all that in mind, where does it start? Well, it starts with an API. I get asked the question all the time, what do you need to integrate services? I'm like, well, you have to begin with an API. If you don't have an API, you can't programmatically transmit data between systems, okay? And that's at the heart of what OrderCloud is. So let's get past the marketing and let's start talking about some of those features. I wanted to begin, this is the hardest part of any talk for me, is before you get into the details, how do you kind of summarize the upper level of what you're discussing and bringing about? And so I thought about this for quite a bit of time, and I really kind of just came across this incredible summary from Computer Weekly about Gartner's Composable Strategies for Business article. And Gartner is very clear that, hey, this is not just a business strategy. It applies to technologies, to organizations, to marketing strategies, to business models. It's a thought process of how to operate. We apply that same strategy to technology and how we deliver that. The keys to those things are modularity, autonomy, orchestration, and discovery. Okay? Very ambiguous words. What can they mean? They can be applied to a lot of things, right? But they do have some very distinct components of what makes composable software function and work. And I'll go into each of those in detail and talk about how OrderCloud supports them. But these are all concepts that have been part of software architecture practices for a good long while. And it's an important distinction between the people who are slapping composable and headless on top of their marketing stack without actually approaching it from delivering the software that way. And when I'm speaking to a customer, the question to me is always, well, what makes you different from your competitors? And for me, that question is an easy answer. And that's what I'm going to try to demonstrate with you guys today. So, discovery. Okay? From the perspective of OrderCloud, these are fundamentals of how people discover what your software does and how it works within the ecosystem of the solutions that they're creating. Okay? For us, it's documentation. How well do you document your software? How open do you make that for consumption and use and learning to the developers and to the users who are interacting with your platform? This is an area that I feel like we've done a very, very good job over the years, curating our portal and making sure that as developers come to it, they have the information they need to move quickly and work. And one of the really nice stories that I have is a couple of years ago, right after Sitecore acquired us, we went out to speak to NBC Sports, okay? And we introduced them to OrderCloud. Their development team created accounts, got into their sandbox, and at the end of the day, they had already built the catalog and were submitting orders programmatically through the API. And we didn't assist them in any way to do that. So that proved to their business leaders, okay, this is a tool that's going to facilitate our rapid development process, and it's a tool that our developers want to work with. That all is derived from the documentation that we've put together in our portal. I'm going to jump to the other bullet point of knowledge base. The documentation as a technical reference is great. It's automated. It's available. It functions within developer tools. You can auto-generate SDKs in any language you want. You can import it into Connect directly. Ivan's in the audience. You can import it into other middleware tools, or you can reference it directly from Postman. There's lots of different ways, but that automation of that is important. For us, it was also very important that it immediately reflected the status of the API, because we adopted very mature DevOps practices that allow us to release very frequently. Okay? We had a release this morning. We had a release yesterday. We release all the time. But if you're sitting there releasing and you're waiting for documentation to catch up, everybody loses. So our API docs are actually generated by reflecting on the API in its current status. Okay? Developers may know Swashbuckle. We started a little before Swashbuckle, so it's a custom implementation of ours, but it ends with the same result. But the point of it being, hit it, generate it, and spit it out, and use it from there. That works also the same with our SDKs and our other developer tools that stay synchronized with the API as it is deployed. The documentation is also connected to that Swagger spec. So what you see from API reference standpoint, with all the properties and everything that's in there, that is using the API spec inside of the portal application. So always 100% up to date. Okay? Actually, it's always ahead, because there's features that we flag and don't document that are already in production, but you haven't seen them yet in the documentation. But they'll get there. So another key point is the domain. I'm on the wrong slide. That's the one. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't do this very often, so forgive my, insecurities. The domain, which is lower down in here than on my notes. Discovery is the ease of use and finding components and determining their usefulness. Well, if you go into a commerce application and the terminology for your resources don't make sense, and they don't connect with what you're trying to accomplish with your solutions, then you're going to get frustrated. So we've always paid really close, detailed attention to create an extremely generic naming scheme. So there isn't ambiguity between what this item does and what that item does. That also extends itself into the API itself. So endpoints, very critical that they're consistent, right? Imagine having singular and pluralization mixed up in your URL endpoints. It's frustrating to not have that consistency. So we pay very close detail to those types of things. And then I'll touch on the last part of this is REST adherence. Back in the early days of this, when people were first asking, what is an API? When you're talking to customers, now the expectation is that you have an API. We would go through how we tried to stay true to what Dr. Fielding put out in his specification for REST APIs. We maintain that, but I personally have lost a little sight about the importance of that because we've moved a little bit. But it is there, and it's key, because you need to get those responses back as you expect them. Status codes need to be accurate. The methods that you call to need to be representative of their actions. For example, early on we supported the patch HTTP method, right? And it's meant to be atomic. It's not the full scope of the document. You can take just one piece of it, update that, and the document that comes back to you, the response, should reflect the entire document in its newly changed state. We do that, and it has the right response items, 201, 204, the things that are important. Over the years, I've evaluated a lot of APIs for solutions that I've helped customers. And the first time I run into an API that responds with a 200 status code, and then the body is an error message, I know I'm dealing with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing with APIs. So beware if you encounter those. So I'm going to slide on into orchestration. And that says connectivity. Nope. Orchestration, connectivity is the bullet point. So, it might help if I just make my slides bigger so I can see my slide on my screen. That'll be very helpful. Thank you. All right, orchestration. Key. You heard the words today from Dave. You're going to hear them when you go to Ivan's talk, hopefully. Orchestration is what it sounds like, right? It's taking all the parts, the 26 pieces of an orchestra, and working them together cohesively to function as one, right? So orchestration in a composable system is the underlying notion of what's in integration, okay? It's the preparedness of the components for integration and the governance and in development in the runtime environment. That's the technical description. For us, what it means is making sure that you can get into and out of OrderCloud as you need to make your other systems work and function together. We have a number of strategies that support that, and the first one I'll cover is API clients. So, we hired a new product person. The first question they asked was, how do you support channels? I said, well, what's a channel? Oh, just imagine an order comes over from Amazon. How do you support that? I'm like, well, we're an API. You can put any data you want into our system as long as it adheres to our API specs. But the strategy to that is take an API client dedicated to that channel of traffic and allow that to govern what comes in and out and what channel it comes in and out through. That means it'll be logged under that. You'll know it exists there. You isolate it for troubleshooting. You can identify when there's a problem with performance, where it's coming from. It's the governance of the context of which you're operating. For the most part, the obvious things are, I need a client for my storefront. I need a client for my administration application. I need a client for my middleware. My recommendation is to always liberally use them. Use them like crazy. Have 40, 50 of them. It's great. Segment your traffic where you need to. If I've got supported integrations to, say, 10 different systems, I'm going to have an API client dedicated for each one of those. Okay? If it goes directly into a large middleware that functions globally to multiple other endpoints, I'm still going to use those API clients because I want to know when that traffic is coming in, what its intended purpose is. Okay? Coupling that with API clients is security profiles. So this is what governs the access. We adopted OAuth 2 very early on. We were coming from the point where we were constantly being asked to support SAML integrations, and I just was like so tired of dealing with XML, and I just said, come on, please. So when OAuth 1 wasn't that great, 2 came, and I was rejoicing. I thought it was the solution to a lot of problems. And that was a number of years ago, so I think it's proven itself out. But within that is the notion of scope or roles. Okay, we support those through our security profiles, and they're a resource in the API that you can assign to those other users, so that when they ask the API, our IDP for that API client to say, here are the security profiles and the roles that I want, we marry those together to make sure you're able to grant them. Okay, and in OrderCloud, you can have multiple security profiles, and so we create a combination of those into a unique data set that applies to that user. So a person, you could have roles designed as a particular function inside of a business, and that person may actually belong to 4 or 5 different functions. You don't have to create a different set of roles for that user. You can combine them together to come out. So, all right, 15 minutes. I'm doing okay. I can talk a little too much sometimes, so got to be careful. All right, so then we're going to start talking about how we connect into different things. And webhooks was the first strategy that we applied. It was about 9 years ago when we started this project, and GitHub had just introduced theirs, and we're like, oh man, this is awesome. This is what we should be doing. So we quickly jumped on adding that to our API. And it's straightforward. Something happens and you send out an event. But the way that you apply that has some nuances to it. And so with OrderCloud, what we chose was first, we need a pre and a post webhook. Okay? So we recognize that sometimes you want to validate something before you allow the API call to happen. So the pre allows you to reject it. And the post allows you to react to what's happened after the system has processed the request. So sign both of those. Secondly, the concept of elevated credentials is critical inside of a composable system. Okay? Security profiles, I told you, govern things, and API clients provide the context. If you have a webhook that calls out and you need to go out and calculate tax and apply that tax back to the user's order, you need to do that outside the context of the user, because that user has the ability to assign that value to the order themselves if you grant them those rights. You need your middleware to do that, and you need to use an elevated credential set. So our webhooks allow you to apply those to the user's request and, and outside the scope of the user doing it. So order submit's triggered, pre-webhooks called out, we apply some additional scopes to that so the middleware can take that, use the token, and apply the payments or the tax or the shipping to the order. Nice, secure methodology. And then the last thing was, sometimes you just blast everything all at once. So we set our webhooks up to be assignable. So you can assign one webhook to many endpoints, right? And it just lends some efficiency to your operations. Then lastly, I'll talk about integration events. So this is about 4 years old as a strategy. And what we understood and what we were supporting through webhooks added some complexity to the operations. Okay, so let's say you're adding a product to a cart, right? And that webhook fires off. The webhook's going to give you the request body and the response body. Okay, but it's very specific to that API call. So you're not going to necessarily get everything you need inside of that request object. So the middleware receiving that may have to call back and get more data from OrderCloud in order to process the second transaction that occurs in the middleware. So we started to talk about how can we supply some additional data, change the way that webhooks work to be more tuned to the business event that's being supported. And we decided to generically call it integration events. And the first one we created was the checkout integration. And if you're trying to orchestrate a checkout process, there's so many data points that can change from even the smallest change of the items in that person's cart. Okay? So imagine I have a cart, 4 products, several different quantities, and I now have calculated my shipping estimate and I've calculated my tax, right? And then that user decides, you know what? I want 10 of those things, not 4. Well, all of those values are invalidated now. So how do you go out and get all that information again? And how do you keep track of when those changes are occurring inside of the experience that is in the hands of the user? It's hard. So what we understood was, hey, we already know that because we validate an order every single time there's a change. And if there's a change that invalidates data, we will inform the user, the developer back to let them know it's changed. You need to reevaluate these things. So we decided, well, let's hook that. Let's take all that information that we use and send it off to the third party, to the middleware, and let them also handle what they need to handle based on that change and send it back to us in a strongly typed way so that we could take that and essentially recreate the 5 API calls that update all those different data properties. Okay? So it's an orchestration of that checkout process from a controlled way that acts like a webhook, but it's smarter. Right? So it's a very powerful tool that has provided a lot of value for the partners and our customer implementations. So, I have a note in here to talk about Ivan. His talk in Sitecore Connect, he's going to show a lot of techniques for configuring the integrations between systems. And in those configurations, they're like called triggers and different things that are enabled, right, to receive and send events out of Connect. And what's great and what's a differentiator sometimes in the market space when you're talking about headless systems is OrderCloud is truly 100% headless. Okay? So when you're taking a webhook and you need to configure that, you do it through an API call. So if you have a system like Connect that has those configurations built into it so that it can send over the configuration to OrderCloud to say, this is my trigger. Please send this to here. It's already there. It works. And he's going to show you how a lot of those things work and function together. And for us, as a demonstration of how we feel like we're ahead of the composable strategy, we had those things already in place. So when we were introduced to this new thing, we're like, well, what do you want us to do? It's already done. But Ivan did find things for us to work on. So did we jump? Did I turn this off? Clicker ain't working anymore. There, manually do it. All right, so moving on to autonomy, okay? This one probably has the most controversy around it. When you talk about what autonomy is, it's supposed to be the minimal functionality that you need for your service to function, okay? Extending the scope of that is disruptive in an autonomous environment. And secondly, it needs to be capable of operating in unanticipated ways. Okay? So there's no way for us, like there's a lot of times where I get a request from a business person saying, we need to have supported integrations. We need to already have an integration directly to Stripe. Why don't we have that? It's like, well, because we can't anticipate every possible permutation of how someone's going to integrate to Stripe. So we need to build the functionality to make the connections out and in and allow the community to create their own customizations within that small space, right? We're minimizing the effort with our strategies, but we can't complete that last stage. And there's a lot of really good examples of that. And I talk a lot of times about shipments, okay? And so you can define a product to have dimensions, and you can use that as a single parcel to calculate the shipping dimension at FedEx or whatever it may be and get that estimate back. But more than likely, when that product gets into the fulfillment warehouse, they're going to take other products, put them into a box, add some padding, do some different things and send that out, which renders that shipping estimate completely useless. And how that company external to us functions is unknown, right? So we can't anticipate how they do that. So create strategies to enable the ease of those integrations to work. To me, that's what autonomy is, right? Sometimes, though, also autonomy means we're not a content management system. So don't ask us to store content. In the composable strategy, there are systems designed to do that. There are systems designed to calculate tax. We're not going to build a tax calculation system. Avalara would destroy us in the market. They're brilliant, right? So we're going to stick to what we do, which is commerce transactions. And we're going to try to enhance that within those constraints of that minimal effort and purpose. So some examples of where things have been applied over the years. IDP, identity. It's almost always the first thing you talk about in a new solution. Who's going to control login, right? OrderCloud has a very good IDP. We support multiple personas so that you can segment those users into the right permission sets and function of OrderCloud. But you may be talking to somebody that already has an entire set of IDP systems built, and they don't want to have to replace that, and they can't synchronize passwords. That's not secure. OpenID Connect was the answer to that, right? It's built off of OAuth, very much lends itself to it. And so that autonomy exists. So we've offered the ability to do something, opened up the door to another system to provide that in its own way. I'm going to come back last to ad hoc products. So I'm going to jump over, and I've talked about integration events, so I won't go too far into that. But there are several different types of integration events. And what I talked about previously was checkout integration, but some of the newer ones, tracking, okay? So you saw today unified tracking as a new component that's going to be coming out. And every system that accumulates personalized information has tracking beacons, and you may throw a dozen of them into, JavaScript beacons into your interface and do that. But we have OrderCloud users that are using vending machines to submit orders, okay? There's no JavaScript beacon and a vending machine, okay? Maybe you could do some APIs there, but what we said was, hey, let's just take that burden from you. So every time you have these particular actions, a line item being added to a cart, an order being submitted, a user registering, we fire off that event so that those systems can consume those directly. So it can take away some of the UI aspects of tracking user data. We did also, for this particular one, fulfill on the back end so that we have a consumer of that information that pushes it into SYN, pushes it into Discover directly. We're waiting on unified tracking to do it for CDP, but it's a trivial exercise. And also, it's agnostic. It's autonomous. So you can point that to any of your own systems if you wanted to do that, right? Order distribution is another aspect of autonomy. So we have really robust marketplace capabilities that allow for an order being placed to multiple suppliers to be distributed out dynamically to those other entities and receive back their shipping information and roll that back up to the single order that the consumer placed, right? But we stop at the point where we create that line of responsibility. We know and allow you to configure how that order gets to, identifies which physical location that it should be fulfilled from, but we don't take that step into the warehouse. We don't do the bin selection and the shelf selection and handle the pick and pack side of stuff, because there are other systems that companies probably already have in place to do that work. So that's our line. That's the definition of what autonomy means in this. Locale, as we were talking about earlier, locale is another separation, right? We know that you need to know who this user and what locale they belong to. And within OrderCloud, we know that it's important that you can have a price based on their currency available to them. But we're not a content management system. So we don't have a way for you to store descriptions and images and static content-related items to products and so forth. But you can use the assignment of the locale to that user to pull that right information out of your DAM and bring that into the interface in a unified way. Okay. Overrides is an important part of this too, and especially when you talk about what's unanticipated. Calculating tax, even pricing, can sometimes not be from OrderCloud. We encounter customers. One of my favorites is they say, "Well, can you support our pricing?" And I said, "Well, what is it?" They said, "Every single customer has unique pricing for every product." I'm like, "Well," and they're a B2B company, so I'm like, "Well, how many customers do you have?" And they're like, "Well, we have about 400,000 customers." So you're going to have 400,000 price schedules for every single product in our system. And they said, "That's the way it would work." I said, "We can support it, but you're going to have a nightmare managing that." Why, sometimes you push back and say, "Well, why are you choosing to do that? It sounds like an inefficient way to operate your business." But that's what they do. Okay. But then they say, "Well, we already have a system that's really good at managing that, and we've built all this up over the history of our company, and we have an API that you can reference for pricing. Can we just do that instead?" You're like, "No problem, because you can override the price of the product." So display the product to the user, allow them to add it to the cart, use your middleware to intervene, find the right price, and put it onto that order. Okay? So you're separating those lines of autonomy. We take you to a point, and we can fulfill all the way, or you can intervene where you need to and make the solutions dynamic. So the last one's ad hoc products. This is one of our newest features. We released it last spring. A long time ago, when we were first talking about API-first systems, I would describe the notion of decoupling the head. Back then, it was decoupling the interface from the back end. Now they call it headless, blah, 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 right? But what it was for us was decoupling was the important part, right? The modern software architecture that people were pursuing was having these scalable systems that interacted but weren't tied together tightly. For us, ad hoc products was the same thing. We were decoupling products from OrderCloud. So you say, well, how can you do that? I mean, a commerce system needs to sell products. But what we understood was we take the live data of a product and we validate that as they put it onto a cart before they check out. But once they check out, we capture that product into a historical table because that data is still live. And if you change that information, you don't want to change the historical data. So we said, okay, so what are the key points and relevant properties that we have to have in order to capture that historical information, which also then becomes applied to promotion evaluations and approval rules and all the other aspects of the order process. And so we came out with ad hoc products and said, fine, you have Salsify PIM, you have PIMCore, and you don't want to synchronize your products to us. You have Channel Advisor, which is designed to synchronize products to things. So we said, remove that concern. If you can browse, navigate, and display product information to your users, then tell us what that is when they get ready to order it, and we'll bring it into OrderCloud dynamically. And along the way, if you'd like, add this flag, and we'll add it to your product catalog so you can start lazy loading products during a strangler pattern type of migration from another system to OrderCloud. Okay? Very powerful feature functionality, but very much at the core of what a composable strategy is. So, moving on to modularity, our last topic, and you'll see that I've already kind of talked a lot about this, because autonomy is very closely related to modularity for me. So what this really means is you're partitioning application functionality into components, right? And those components need to have clear and complete business responsibilities, okay? And, you know, that strategy becomes controversial when the salesperson's in the room and that customer says, if I could just have this, and you know that's going to be hard to give them unless we build something and it doesn't really fit our business model and our software, but that salesperson comes along and says, you need to build this so I can close the deal, right? So you push back because modularity is important to what you're delivering out to the customer base. And sorry, I have a timer too, so. I'm not doing too bad, actually. So, if Sitecore is supposed to be a leader, and we should be, a thought leader in composable strategies, we have to maintain modularity of all of our products. When they start to overlap is when we start to break down that modularity, and Dave kind of touched on it today. Sometimes it can seem like there's some conflicting functionality between products. There needs to be very clear lines between what those responsibilities are. Overlap is not wrong, but you need to do it within the context of how the future of those product roadmaps are coming to fruition. So I'm going to give a couple of examples of this, and I've touched on some already, but I'll talk about products. So our product resource is a very good example of how we draw the lines of modularity. We have a property like description that's available, and our partners will first look at that and say, oh, okay, that's what I put in my product description. How can you support multiple languages for that? And then my response will be back, that description field's not really meant for content. That's meant for your internal organization to know what this product's intent is. It's a description for you, not for your customers. Okay? So we draw that line. If we started to add properties to support UI mechanisms that were based on content, we would never stop. And if you go look at Content Hub's PCM and you see all the properties they have in there, it's massive. There's a lot, and there should be. Those separation concerns are important. However, what we do know is that our minimal properties of a product are not sufficient to operate your transactions at times within your commerce application, which is why very early on we created the notion of extended properties. And what that basically is we are allowing you to take an unstructured JSON object and associate that to every resource within our platform. And back then, we had to do some magic to make that work because we're a transactional database first before we get into a NoSQL type of a database backend. So how do you merge those two together was a complex computer science problem that we solved elegantly, which is, but you also see why we have XP indexes, because we needed to make that searchable. We needed to change some things with that. And so as the years have gone on, we started implementing more Elasticsearch technologies, but that XP still remains the way to create your additional properties at work. Simple examples are, I have a user object, and I want to specify how old they are, right? So every customer implementation has 30 requests of properties they would like added to the base model. And we can't support that in a multi-tenant world. So XP solves those, because you can tell us what that is and use it to your heart's content. All right, so all of that said, what does that mean overall to everything else? And my first thought, because I was sitting in the meeting looking at this diagram the other day, and I was like, you know what? I should use this as an example. This is a basic reference architecture, okay? You've got Azure Redis cache, you've got storage queues, SQL databases. Over here, you've got OrderCloud. You've got a middleware that is associated with OrderCloud. You've got websites, backend, middleware. You have all these things, and it's great. Even down here, you have Stripe, right? So I see this, and I tell people, yes, this looks right. You have a lot of things happening. I said, but this is, the devil is in the details here. And these lines that go in between these boxes, that's where the brilliance is. That's where the intelligence is. That's where the hard part is. That's where composability is, okay? How do you get information out of one of these nodes into another one, and how does that node receive it? Do you need to transform something along the way? Do you need to unify two different systems into one going across? That tethering of all those systems is a composable strategy. That's the orchestration, right? For me, I believe that we should be working hard to ensure that those lines are easier to do between our products, but they should also be easier to do into other products, right? It's easy for us to be insular and say, all right, we want to make sure all of our products communicate and integrate together. But in commerce, that's not going to be Stripe. That's not going to be a product of Sitecore. So there's a reality that there is always going to be other components of a solution that aren't Sitecore products. So why would we force our customers to use only Discover or only CDP or only Personalize when we can't force them to only use Stripe, right? So build the technologies to be composable, to be integratable into other systems, and fulfill the technology in between those lines. That is where future roadmap we were talking about. Hopefully in the next week or so, we're going to be releasing a supported integration between OrderCloud and Discover. OrderCloud is going to be the place where you can create your product information. You can use all the functionality of OrderCloud to define your visibility and your pricing rules and promotions, or coupons, if you will, because promotions are also in Discover, but they're different intents and purposes. But all of that information that allows you to build from a simple B2B, a simple B2C to a complex B2B environment or even a marketplace is going to automatically transfer itself into Discover. And it's going to be indexed. It's going to apply all of the personalization rules and logic and AI intelligence that goes into that and make it available for you to query directly through OrderCloud. We're going to proxy that call for you because there's information in that data that's private. It's protected. We're going to append that information to those queries, and those queries to Discover are going to remain identical to what Discover publishes for customers who aren't using OrderCloud. We're going to get the response, and we're going to send it back out exactly as Discover would if you were directly integrating with their interface. But the key to this is you update a product in OrderCloud, and within 15 seconds, and it will be faster because these are sandbox environments right now, you see that already updated in Discover directly and available to your end consumer and buyer into their interface. I think, and I know because I've been talking to customers about it, it's a big change. It reduces the scope of effort and work, and it brings the brilliance of the Discover technology to the commerce solution immediately without any additional context and effort of the implementer to create the middleware to support these transactions, because they will be at volume, and you need the infrastructure to support those, which can be costly. So that's a very technical reference. diagram. And then yesterday, I was on a sales call, and I saw this diagram. I was like, oh, man, who made that? That's a really nice diagram. Can I borrow that? Because I don't do graphics very well. So I pulled it. I obscured away some of the product information, and I added this in here. But I just thought it was a great demonstration of what a composable system is. You've got XM, Discover, OrderCloud. You've got a POS system. You've got applications, all the different interfaces that you may support. You've got Saucify as a PIM up here. Okay? You've got Content Hub. OrderCloud again with a different flow. Over here you've got shipping, tax, email, address verification, payment processors, fraud processors. All of these things working together. And then once again I saw lines with no detail. And I said, this is why it's good to know how you make these things work together and how we intend to support them moving ahead as our software evolves and improves as we move along. So that's my talk. Sure. I'll just add at the end here, please, if you don't know about the community Slack channel, and I think most people here do, we have OrderCloud channels in there. Join them. Talk to us. The people who are responding in there are actually the engineers on my team who are writing the code in OrderCloud. Okay? There's no better answer from those guys. And when they don't know the answer, they look in the code. So you're not going to find it in a better source. Right? And then also, if you're not aware, OrderCloud.io, that's our portal website. You can go there, sign up for free, set up a sandbox, and use OrderCloud without restriction, and see what it does for you, and have some fun. So, all right. Do we have any questions? We do have some time for questions. We have. Sure, go ahead.
So the permissions model is really powerful for B2B, but there's a lot of cycle commerce customers who are maybe B2C or D2C. And I saw a talk with Jake Hookham. He was talking about maybe how you could use the permissions model for multi-channel in a B2C or D2C. But are you recommending cycle commerce customers who are B2C or D2C to use OrderCloud, or do you think it's overkill for that?
Okay, I'm supposed to repeat the question. We started talking about permission models, and we went into implementation solution type paradigms of B2B, B2C, D2C, and so forth, right? Yeah. First off, the permission models aren't relevant to a particular flavor of commerce that's operating. They're very specific to API endpoints that have their functionality. They're divided in between reader and admin. So if you want to allow somebody to read something or administer and change it, you have that separation. And every API endpoint has its own role that you can apply either of those two scenarios to. Okay? So you can group them how you need to provide access into the API system. The other part of it, the context of the different paradigms of commerce, right? I've started talking privately and saying, I don't care about all the B's and the C's. They're irrelevant. Okay? OrderCloud supports those configurations, how you see fit to configure them. And it can be simple. It can be just one buyer. Everybody can see those products and they can order them. That's a B2C example. Shopify right there. As you extend the capabilities and functionalities beyond that, you add some more complexity, but you don't disrupt the other paradigms that may be supported within that single marketplace. So you should do anything. OrderCloud is not limited to those paradigms.
May I answer that?
Yeah. Rui?
I guess I'm Rui from the Discover Search side of house. I would add to that in that it also, the key point here is that it's never overkill, right, to use OrderCloud in its permission systems. It may be that you don't use it to the full extent today, but the key thing here is that you future-proof that business in case they want to go B2B, or in case they want to become a marketplace, right? In case they want to bring in suppliers into their network. And those permissionings are there. You can just create tomorrow, and now all of a sudden you have a B2B site that just runs on the same digital commerce platform in the back end.
And we've actually, a majority of the time, it's been reverse. We've had customers that say, oh, no, look, my storefront's fine. I need to support my business-to-business transactions. And we're like, okay, what products are different? Well, they're the same. All right, well, let's build your B2B and show you how that works. And now watch me flip the switch and sell to your consumers. And there's nothing changed. You're using the same product sets, but you have pricing that's different for those. You have delivery mechanisms that are different for those personas, but it all works together. OrderCloud is lightweight, and it's lightweight on purpose because it's designed to be functional for across that entire spectrum. You don't have to add and load more onto it. There's no installed modules and things that bloat the software. So.
Very strict on time. If it's really quick, please.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And I'll stick around in the hall if you want. So.
Cool. So you mentioned about the API middleware, and it sounded from what you were saying that you anticipate a call from wherever going direct to OrderCloud, which then calls out through webhooks to the middleware. Do you ever see a situation where you'd have a call that would go through the middleware first before hitting OrderCloud?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. Oftentimes, if somebody's doing a product catalog import, they'll pull that information through a middleware, pass it over to OrderCloud. Middleware is really about scale of the traffic that you may be supporting and having that transformation layer available to you to move that entity from one system to the other, right? You're mapping the ETL layer is what sometimes is commonly referred to. So yeah, it's bidirectional. It should always be. It should, middleware is in the middle of two things that are working together, right?
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so if anybody wants, I'll hang out in the hallway and I'll answer questions.